Hello, everyone. It's Frances Widdowson here. Welcome to Rational Space Disputations. For people who don't know me, I was previously a professor at Mount Royal University until December 2021, and then I was fired from Mount Royal University. So this is something of continuing interest to me, the situation in universities. And the format of Rational Space Disputations is to invite a guest on every week, someone who I admire or find their work interesting. And I interview them for an hour. And then for the second part, the screens are turned and then my guest interviews me for an hour. And that's kind of an interesting format to give someone the opportunity to be in the driver's seat, and hopefully more light can be shed through that as well. It's called Disputations, so we're not going to shy away from areas with which we disagree. There's nothing wrong with disagreeing. People have to realize this. It doesn't mean that you dislike the person and so on. So that's the whole nature of the disputations. Anyways, so today's guest is Dr. Rima Azar, who is a psychology professor at Mount Allison University. And I am a great admirer of Dr. Azar, Rima Azar. I've followed her case. I'm shocked. I'm horrified. I'm absolutely horrified at what has happened to Rima. I think this is shameful. People should just hang their heads in shame for what has happened to her. And hopefully we're going to get into this in more detail during the segment. Anyway, welcome to Rational Space Disputations, Rima.
Thank you, Frances. I say, Frances, you said kind words about me, and what would I say about your case or how much I admire you, and I'm grateful for your support, kind humanity toward me when my story happened, and also the Society of SAFS, obviously, and Dr. Mark Mercer, Society of Freedom for Freedom of Academic Freedom and Scholarship.
Yes. So, and SAFS, for people who don't know, that's another great organization that was very, very important in defending Rima and defending all people, regardless of the political, philosophical issues. They stand up for academic standards and open inquiry at universities. And so that includes both Rima and me. And I'm a board member. So just so people know, I'm actually a board member for the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship. So I think, Rima, just to start, perhaps you can just introduce yourself and talk about a little bit, perhaps about your research areas, and then as well, well, I guess we'll get into it in more detail about, because that's what I'm mainly interested in, is your case. But it would be helpful, perhaps, for the audience to know what your sort of political kinds of perspective is, where you're coming from, those sorts of details.
Sure. So my name is Rima Azar, and I am a associate professor of health psychology at Mount Allison University in New Brunswick, Atlantic Canada. I am, what can I say about my work? I am interested in stress, and my lab is called the Psychobiology of Stress and Health Lab. Precisely interested in early stress, so from the prenatal period onward, postnatally, in infants and children and youth, but not only, of course. So I examine stress from a biopsychosocial perspective, using measures from the saliva, so salivary measures of stress hormones or inflammatory markers in the blood, and psychosocial factors. So maybe interested in stress-related disorders like depression and anxiety, etc.
Yes. So, and it's mostly for younger people? Is
Yes.
that what most of your research is involved with? So
yes.
I was just kind of thinking that was sort of funny, you saying that, because you must be going through quite a lot of stress your own life.
Yes, and yourself as well.
Are you taking that? Are you incorporating that into your research? in any
Well,
way?
I have ideas for the future for sure, lots of ideas, because as you can guess, it's extremely highly stressful, not only on the individual, but on the family, on the people around, by proxy. So it has a lot of implications, what is happening.
Yes. And like, how do you deal with that? Like, is there, like, I know your research is into this, so you're looking at indications of stress. Are you also looking at how to cope with stress? Is that part of your research as well?
That's as well. So one line of research is looking at during pregnancy, so maternal health, mental health, and the impact on stress reactivity in infants. And another line of research is looking precisely on coping in parents of children who have complex care needs, sometimes and also in other populations like correctional officers, like inmates, etc.
Okay. And so how have you been coping with stress yourself in this situation?
Well, stress is part of life, as Dr. Hanseli would have said,
Yes.
it's the salt of life. But there is unneeded stress sometimes where we could have lived without it. We find our ways, I guess, depending on our personalities. We have support. I hope you have support, as I have, like, you know, the family, friends, professionally as well. I mean, you know, unions, my union representing me, support, I'm grateful, CIUT as well. And I would say personally, how do I cope? I just live one day at a time, day by day. I see things from the larger perspective, and as well the attention to details, because it's a lot of work, as you know better than me, when we are in this battle, I would say, you know.
Yes.
So
Yes. Yeah, it's a balancing act for sure. One thing I really admired about how you responded, there's a couple of things that I wanted to say. The first is that you didn't back down. So this is a big problem now. Yes. If you think you've done nothing wrong, don't get intimidated into compromising on the matter. So that's the first thing. The second thing is you don't seem to have become bitter and, you know, like some people kind of, and it's understandable. It's an understandable situation where you feel you being dealt with in an unjust way, to become very angry and, you know, unable to sort of just argue the intellectual points about it. So, you know, is there something that you were, is this, you know, how were you able to pull that off? Those two very, very important things.
Thank you. Of course, I have emotions, or the emotions, and anger is part of them, but I am not a type of person who is focused on anger. So I use that, let's say, anger to keep doing what I'm doing. Let's say that blog is still there. So Bambi is giving a message. It's a form of resistance, intellectual resistance. But for me, there's still pleasure in writing, and I don't self-censor myself. The anger is, I would say, not only your story makes me angry, because I think it's so unfair what happened. My story, of course, is unfair. Everyone's story is unfair. But what is sad is what's happening at our universities at large, not just yours or mine, in Canada, even by extension in the world. It's this intolerance, we are betraying the mission of a university. It's just, so there is that, if you wish, call it anger, yes, but it's mixed with sadness, disappointment.
Yes. Yes, and actually, to bring up Mark Mercer in the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship, he's really helped me with, like, because when I first started encountering this problem several years ago, I was very angry, and I wanted to lash out and to do things, and you know, he was very calm and said, you know, you should just try to get people to explain themselves and don't want to punish them. Like, it's not a good thing if you want to punish people like punishment and being cruel, that's kind of a some, I guess some personalities respond more than others with that kind of response. And if you sort of feel that tendency within yourself, recognize it and, just sort of say, this is just a kind of an emotional reaction to having people treat you in this way. And it's not going to be beneficial to have that.
Absolutely. I'm not surprised by the wise words of Dr. Mercer, himself calm and, I would say it's not about, in the end, it's about education. Like what do we want to teach our children and the children of our children? Is the intolerance is what we want to leave them with? From that point of view, I come to things more.
Yes. So, and people might not know this, you came to Canada from Lebanon. I was wondering if you could just, give the audience a bit of an understanding of your background with respect to that and how that's informed your research and how you see things in Canada. I think the audience would find that quite interesting.
Yes, I arrived to Canada in 1990, so that's 32 years ago. First to Quebec, I was 17, so I turned 18 in Canada. Quebec, 15 years. I lived in Ontario for 4 years, and then here in New Brunswick, almost 14 years. So that's my background is Lebanon. Left Lebanon because of civil war. Came to Canada. What attracted me the most in Canada is precisely freedom, being free, freedom of expression, not being killed on a checkpoint because of my religion or because of this or that. So seeing where we are right now in Canada is deeply tragic, sad for immigrants, especially for immigrants.
Yes. So did you, in Lebanon, what was the freedom of expression type of situation there when you were, so how old were you? How old were you when you left Lebanon?
I was 17, end of the 17 years, so 17, yes. And I was 2 years and 9 months precisely, or 3 years when war started, so civil war. As I explain it, like, in war, everyone has blood on his or her hands, so all fractions. What happens is that the institutions of the country become under attack, right? So become weaker, and every group or tribes or group or has, militia, and they start fighting each other. Each thought that they were doing something probably good, defending the community. But the country, what about the country? What about the unity? So I come from that background. And when I see that our country is not united or being united or someone caring about that, I see danger, red flag, I worry because of my background precisely. So right now in Lebanon, of course, there's no more war, civil war, but there is always a ghost. The ghost of civil war. Always, freedom of expression is under attack. From time to time, journalists are killed, not just socially, professionally, like us, but for real, or intellectuals. And if I may do a parallel or like a perspective here. So when people are killed for real, of course, it scares people around them. But when people are professionally killed or socially here or demonized, it has the same effect without the killing, that the effect of fear. Fear is powerful. So there's that. But in Lebanon, people aspire for more freedom of expression. They come together when something horrible happens, like a killing. They ask for justice. They look up, or they used to look up, or still look up and search for these values in the Western world, etc.
And because war and violence, and when did the civil war end in Lebanon?
Precisely in 1990, the year we came, we arrived, my family and I, we arrived in June 17, and it ended in October.
Yeah, because it seems that like, I don't quite know how that works in war, like the situational war, because right now, and this is sort of an interesting sort of thought experiment in the Canadian case, is that, we really haven't had war, for decades. Like, I guess the FLQ crisis in Quebec
Yes.
was sort of the last kind of, martial law, like people
Thank
talk about the
goodness.
trucker convoy a little bit, but I don't really think that's in the same league as the FLQ crisis. Um, and we're kind of preoccupied with speech in Canada, whereas if you're at war, it's more fear from violence, I would imagine, that would be on
Yes.
people's minds most of the time. Like the speech, you can't even really get to that stage, it would seem, because you're kind of fighting it out.
Yes, but
Violent.
yes, true. But what happened in Lebanon during war, and maybe right now, media is every political group or political party or movement has a media or a platform, TV or newspaper. So if you read all the media, you can get a sense of what's happening, or the truth, the facts, if you want. But if you are someone who only reads one, let's say people here would only listen to CNN, but not Fox, allergic to Fox, or only Fox, allergic to CNN, or I'm saying whatever, or in Canada, only the CBC, nothing else, or you miss on the other perspective. You need to read, I don't know, I'm convinced that you need, at least I need, to read those whom I don't agree with, perhaps before those whom I agree with. And you challenge your thought yourself, you learn. Who said that you had the right perspective right now? Maybe by reading the other perspective, you learn something. There's some truth in all perspectives. That's what I learned from war.
Yes. And even, you don't even have to go that far. It's sort of like the John Stuart Mill take on this, which I think is very valuable, is that even if you completely disagree with this perspective and you think it's wrong, it's completely wrong, understanding it can tell you more about why your position is correct.
Absolutely, I agree.
Which is very, because it's very difficult. Like there's some, areas which obviously, like it would be highly unlikely, like one also always has to remain open, but it would be highly unlikely that some horrible perspective is true, but you should at least understand that perspective. Like understanding that perspective does not mean that you have any agreement with it or any endorsement with it. And we have this kind of, I think that's where we are now with our society, is it's kind of accepted that this is the right position and nothing else needs to be discussed anymore, because this is right.
Yeah, that's
and then
scary.
therefore, like, and it's, first of all, it's not right. But even if it were right, Mill makes this point, it becomes dead dogma if it's not challenged, even if it is right. Like theory of evolution, for example, is I think there's a lot of huge amounts of evidence that the theory of evolution is correct, right? But that doesn't mean that creationists should be put in jail. Because they're obviously, like I think it's highly improbable that they're correct, but I'm not afraid of hearing the creationist argument, and I don't want to punish the creationists for having that argument. Like this is kind of the difficulty. So I think that's where we're at here in Canada.
Yes, and we can have contradictory ideas at the same time. We can be unsure, we can question, we can doubt, even in faith, let's say religious faith, we question. Even in relationships like spousal, we question and we choose to recommit or not sometimes. But you know what I mean? I feel that we are not allowing ourselves to be flexible anymore, intellectually, emotionally, at all levels.
Yeah, and it's really and that's kind of, to me, seems at the root of this intolerance. Like that's kind of the scary thing, is this intolerance that you just don't, there's no need to have this exist anymore. This view, like we just need to get rid of it, and that of course creates huge conflicts. Like rather than trying to resolve the difference, like the difference that exists, we're trying to figure out, is one view right and the other wrong? Is perhaps there's a bit of truth to each, like what, or maybe they're both wrong.
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
that's not the kind of thing we're doing anymore,
No.
which is like, I think we're heading into, a situation where it's going to be sorted out through violence because we can't communicate anymore. Like the idea of communicate, that we should, and I believe it's Karl Popper, someone said, we let ideas die so that we don't have to. So we're not really giving a chance, like for those ideas to be properly engaged us so we can sort them out amongst ourselves. We're going to have to fight it out violently because we can't communicate. That's kind of the disturbing possibility.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I certainly don't want to spend all this time on the background and not get into the major area here. So I've been reading a few things about, because I did study your case quite a bit when it first came out, but I just revisited some of the things. And I thought it was quite interesting in terms of the conversation we're just having, because from what and to correct me if I'm wrong, the CBC article said that the reason, so you were suspended without pay from Mount Allison because of some things which were said which were true. Like, so there's some things that are true and there's some things that are false. The true things were that well, I'm not sure if these are true. You said that you denied systemic racism, the existence of systemic racism. You said that Black Lives Matter was a radical group, and you spoke to BIPOC people, students, in unkind ways. That's what administration said at Mount Allison. Is that, I was wondering if you could just say, what are they talking about? Is that true? Is that false? What's the situation about that?
I'll say a few words on each. So let's start with systemic racism.
Yes.
I precisely, and I remember one post was on New Brunswick, and I was worried about the radicalization of youth, and I may have written, it's always a reaction to an article, so something published, and sometimes the posts are really irrelevant, are about birthdays of loved ones or whatever, but let's say that one. I said we are in New Brunswick 750,000 people. It is normal to have true racist, but New Brunswick is not racist. It's not systemically racist, I meant, and Canada is not racist. That's what I said. How can I say that Canada is racist when Canada has welcomed me and my family, and I see it welcoming others from all backgrounds, Syrians, Palestinians, Israeli, Ukrainians, you name it, the Russian people who are here, Canadians, Russian. How can I say it? It would be unfair. It would be ungrateful. And I am a scientist, so concepts, I don't buy them like that. Like we study them, we take the time to do research. So yeah, that's where I come from. This is what I've written.
Yes. And just so that we don't lose, because I think this is a major kind of problem that exists. There's racism and there's systemic racism. Do you understand the difference between those two things? Like, what's going on with those differences? Because those are quite different terms. Were you trying to comment on that difference, or did you not see a difference? What was your kind of
for me, because no one ever defines it like this, systemic racism. For me, I hear system, so systemic, I think of laws. I think of particular healthcare practices, maybe. I think of, I want examples. I want to see where, is it in this legal system? Is every, I need to know more about it in order to buy it. That's it. Now we're not talking about that concept anymore. It seems that it's not, but at the time my story went out, it was a big thing. So the systemic racism. And I don't pretend I have the monopoly on truth or on opinions. That's my opinion. Someone else would say, otherwise. Maybe there is, if we think of what happened in Canada in the past, of course, with indigenous people, there is some of that state, call it systemic, I don't know, call it, I don't know if racism is the word, or you know what I mean. So I see all that, I know the history, of course, but I'm talking about right now. Why are we doing this to ourselves right now? And like punishing ourselves or seeing ourselves as really bad because of parts of history or
yeah.
And a concept, that concept is also in the United States, not just here. It's also they try to apply it in France or in Europe. So how come like a concept goes everywhere? Like it's, I question these things. So that's number one. Number two, you mentioned Black Lives Matter. I don't think that radical is an insult. Radical is an observation. So an approach could be mild, milder, more radical. So let's say let's talk about Lebanon. No emotions related to Canada. Lebanon, I would like to see that country sovereign, right? So no one occupying it. So let's say I don't want neither Syria nor Israel or any other country, Iran, etc., to occupy it. But I don't use the same method as the Hezbollah in their very radical approach in what they say or pretend to say or maybe truly think, I'm not a judge, that they don't want anything to, defending Lebanon from Israeli attacks or occupation. So you see what I see things like the approach. So now Black Lives Matter, when they say defund the police, for me, that's radical. I've seen what happened to Lebanon when we have defunded and attacked and weakened the state and the police and the institutions, governmental, state. I mean, so in that sense, or when I think the head of that movement would tell us that they are to communism, let's say. Communism has, of course, its place in society. I have the utmost respect for all political parties, but it is a little bit more radical than socialism. It's to the other side of the extreme. So there are nuances here, and these words were
in terms of radical. Would you argue it's like the extent to which you want to transform society, for example?
Yeah. Yes, the extent to which, but also the method, and I tried to understand BLM a lot. I went to read the website, and I saw sometimes things that didn't make much sense to me. Words put that they were really. I invite people to go check. I went to read the chapter here in New Brunswick, and I didn't understand them. I wish someone can explain to me these words and what are we trying to achieve, etc.
Yeah. And then the speaking about BIPOC people in unkind ways, I find that is hard to believe, Rima, that you spoke about people in unkind ways, but what were they talking about there?
Thank you, that's nice of you. I am supposedly a BIPOC, and I will explain what's BIPOC for you readers who do not know it. Person of Black or Indigenous or people of color. I find that term personally funny. It's meant to describe me, so I'm allowed to give my opinion. I am a deer. I don't know if it's a brown deer, black deer, the color. I don't know. I'm just my first name is Rima. It means a little deer. That's the vlog. So unkind ways. Maybe there was a post, and always taking public articles, never naming someone from school, from students, of course not. So public articles when maybe some young people, a BIPOC, or I don't know, said something, but I am BIPOC myself. So or maybe articles in the media about that topic. We read sometimes really funny things or things that do not make sense, despite the good intention. People have a good intention. They think this is the way to bring justice or more justice or whatever justice. But listen to people from these communities or background that you are talking in their name, right? So listen to their perspectives. Is this the right thing? Maybe that acronym, I don't like it. Maybe another one, I prefer visible minorities. These are the terms that were used in Canada when I came. I saw myself in them. I chose to come here to integrate and to adjust. So that's Quebec. These were the terms used in French in Quebec, but in English as well, I guess. So minorities, yes.
Yes. And so I assume that you would see yourself as an invisible minority.
I don't know if I'm visible with my curly hair or whatever.
I wouldn't like. I think that's one of the big, at least, like this BIPOC, this term BIPOC, which I find is funny. In fact, I actually in my satirical warfare call it BIPOC with a T, to refer to the trans Black identity, because it's kind of got all this intersectionality and that the, is it the Black or the Indigenous that are the most oppressed? And then, of course, you as a person of color who has what would be considered, I assume, white skin, not Black skin, would be able to pass and not have racist epithets thrown at you because of your white skin. If we're going to call, like, I'm uncomfortable, and that's not something I would really want to get into personally, because I'm trying to, I can't stand the race obsessiveness that's going on.
Me too, definitely.
And it's making, and now people say, well, it's because you're a white person, then you can pass. So obviously you're not obsessed, like this sort of thing. But I can see the kind of corrosive impact it's having on how people are interacting with one another. And it certainly made me over the last 10 years much more highly attuned to seeing people's skin color and so on, because I've been kind of, had all this browbeaten into me that I've got to respond differently to different people. So I don't like where it's going, and I'm kind of conscious of it. But that's kind of the argument, I think, is that if you're visible, you're going to be more likely to experience racist treatment than if you're have an invisible minority characteristic.
Yeah, but
do you think that is that a valid kind of way of looking at things, and should we be concerned about that?
I find that, like you, the obsession with that part of identity, the race, the skin, like, come on, like maybe in the summer I'm darker, maybe you see my sister in the summer, she gets really like black skin immediately, right on. Maybe me, it takes more time, or that doesn't happen at all, I don't know. So it doesn't make sense to stop at that and to put people in one category. So you are all white people the same? Is someone from Chicoutimi, Quebec, the same as someone from Tracadie in New Brunswick, or in your area? Or no, even like, or someone from Palestine who happens to have a dark black skin, and Mr. Obama, are they the same? The same background, sociocultural, socio-economic class, I mean.
Yeah. Anyway, so I find this all kind of like, it's part of this intersectionality stuff that's going on, which many find very perplexing. But it is this, and we see this with the LGBTQ initialism as well, is the ordering of the letters is indicative of your oppressed positionality.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, so there's fights not only for which letters are going to be included, but also for the ordering of the letters.
So this is a competition of oppression type of thing?
Yeah, so the idea is, I believe, that the more oppressed you are, the more you should be deferred to in discussions, which I find is very offensive, that kind of idea anyway, because it shows, in my view, a lack of respect for people. Like, I don't want to make an assumption about someone because of the letter that they're associating themselves with, or other people are associating themselves like it, and so it prevents kind of candid conversations, honest conversations, where you don't make these kind of predetermined kinds of things, and there's an encouragement now. And actually, this is Mark Mercer's case. I'm not sure if you know, but Mark Mercer got hauled into a disciplinary process a while ago. Everything turned out okay for him, but not okay, because like it created a chill and everything about it. But he was communicating with in a letter, which was CC'd to a bunch of people, And the claim was that he talked to this person who was Black in a way that he should have known that they would have been upset by, to talk in this way, which he was just saying, look, I'm using words, or I'm mentioning words in a way which everyone should understand is not insulting or trying to, I'm just trying to specifically say something that is clear, and I'm not going to change my language because one of the people, I know that one of the people on the recipients list is Black, but they were kind of telling him that he should have known that. And this
Well,
is
and
yeah.
he's one of the most respectful and kind people
anyway,
I've ever
that
met.
was kind of a shock, because if
Yeah,
one
it
teacher
is.
is going to get hauled before a disciplinary thing, then we're
Yes.
all, who try, like, some people are more aggressive and more abrasive than others, but still, once you start getting into that, trying to, make sure that your tone is not all these kinds of considerations without looking at the actual content, then we're going to get into terrible kind of situation.
Yes.
But yeah, so those are the kind of areas which you, although might have been misrepresented, is not there, but there were a couple that were false. One was about the pronouns matter, and the second is the saying that students were brainwashed.
I missed the first part, sorry, the first part when you said one was.
These are the false, like,
Yes.
so the true, that when you had the systemic racism, the Black Lives Matter as a radical group, and the speaking about BIPOC students in unkind ways, there were things that you did that had some relationship. Now, it wasn't characterized in a way which was very charitable in talking about it, but it wasn't like made up stuff. But the allegations about the use of refusing to use pronouns and saying students were brainwashed, those were false accusations.
Definitely. And that you told me you watched Dr. Peterson,
Yes.
the interview with Dr. Peterson. I will repeat the exact same thing, and I will always say it until I die. These are false accusations. I've never said these words. The story doesn't add up. It's not my style to talk like that. I don't even say it to young people in Lebanon who went to war, who even tortured other people. I don't say that term that you use, brainwash. I say everyone was a victim of this violence, of this war. So if I say this about the youth of Lebanon, I'm not gonna say it here to someone who prefers to be called this or that, or not called this or that. That's not me, and it doesn't make any sense.
Yes, yes. Now, what about the pronouns area?
That story did not happen.
Like,
and it's actually in the media. I'm not saying something not supposed to be saying. The story is still in the in the media, on the radio. So it's not an accurate story. It's a false allegation.
It's a false allegation. So and just, out of interest, what is your views on the pronoun? Like,
I'll come to that, but if I may, I want to say that all these complaints that happened happened because there was an invitation by my employer to when the story happened on February 22nd, inviting complaints, and complaints came. So one of them was this one. So there is a context. We should never forget the context.
Your employer went out and tried to get people to complain about you?
Yeah, and so on social media and in an email as well. So it's about the blog that they do not endorse, and if someone was offended, trigger warning, encouraging rape culture, systemic violence, colonization, etc., domestic violence. I can't remember the precise terms, but all that horrible list. And people were encouraged, students, I assume, to submit complaints under the anti-racism policy of my institution. So that's the context. So there's a context to that story. Now, to answer your question, maybe you are someone, Francis, who has comma she, her, comma, they, them, and I happen not to. Maybe I'm someone who has she or him, her. Maybe I want him, her. I'm free. And you want whatever. So what? So what? I have friends, relatives, students, colleagues, people in the administration who put their pronouns. I do not put it. I can put it. We don't put it. For me, I learned from my story that it's more than that, just a choice of putting those pronouns. It's maybe Dr. Peterson got it right and saw it ahead of us, that it could be used as a compelled speech, as they say in English. And the evidence for me is what happened to me, actually. I didn't even say that. It was used against me. So that's one thing. Now, I'm not saying that people who put their pronouns are not genuine or not necessarily into the rights of all groups or being inclusive and welcoming and kind. I'm not saying that. I believe that most people are good people, especially Canadians. They want the best for the society, but some do not even know why they are using them. Maybe it's to be like others, maybe to be cool, maybe to rise in an organization or in a political system or become prime ministers one day. Maybe I'm saying whatever. I'm just saying that we are different and we do things in different ways for different reasons.
Yes. So so in your view, pronouns, like putting there's a couple of things about the pronouns. One is when someone asks you to use a pronoun that you don't agree with that use of the language, and the they is a good example of this. So there's a demand now that instead of using he or she, you use they. And some people are opposed to that, like using they, because it's confusing. It's a confusing kind of thing. That like if you're have a context where you'd be talking about someone in the singular and you use they, it often sounds like there's more than one person involved, and so this is confusing, especially I might add to people who English is not a first language. So
bravo, thank you. Thank you for raising that up. English is neither my first nor my second language. Yes. So it's already complicated for me with only the he, she, or it, or grammar. So there's that difficulty, of course. And also, I forgot my point. If we are talking to each other directly, do we use the pronouns directly? Like it's when someone is not here more. So it's difficult to know how to use, even if we want to use, right? And plus, as I said, if someone wants me to call him, her, they, a tree or a wall or whatever, I will do it. I will do it. I was in a context of war where we went to a psychiatric hospital once with the Red Cross as a volunteer, and people sometimes think that they are Jesus. I don't know if there is that here, but in the Middle East happens, or maybe during war. So sometimes you go with what people are asking. And you know, like there is respect. There is respect for everyone's wish.
Well, there's a great, this is I'm not sure if you know the show Dr. Phil.
Yes.
Anyway, Dr. Phil recently waded. He usually does like relatively tame things, but he waded into this area by inviting and I can't remember the person's name, but he was some kind of columnist, conservative columnist. Anyway, he was on this program with two, I think, people who were dealing with some of the problems with the trans activism, two trans activists, and he was saying to them, you don't have a right to your pronouns, just like I don't have a right to the adjectives that are used alongside my name. So I don't have a right to demand that you call me handsome and brilliant when you're referring to me, because it's a part of the English language, which is a description. It's not a personal thing. So I can understand why people want their name, like, and I know people who don't even want to shorten, like, if you have your name, it's taking, light, like it's kind of being a little bit too informal if someone just decide, if I just decide to call you Ree or something like that, because your name is Rima, unless you say to me, call me Ree. So that's your personal thing, is your name. That's a different,
Yes,
that's different than pronouns, which are generic references to
I see
people
what you
based upon
mean.
the English language. And what's happened, I think, a little bit is that there's this kind of encroachment into general items of speech and demands that you must accept their way of doing it. It's like people who have their name in a lowercase letters and stuff like that now. So like, it's confusing because if you don't, like, I'm not sure if you know bell hooks. Bell hooks is you sort of, I don't know how to describe bell hooks, but bell hooks is part of this new postmodernist developments, it seems to me, and insisted that her name should be spelled. First of all, her name's not bell hooks. She created a new name. It is now, but so bell hooks. And then she said that bell hooks should be spelled with lowercase letters. And when I was writing a paper once on using bell hooks, and I used it in lowercase letters, someone didn't understand what it was, because it was like bell hooks, like first her name is kind of odd and not, but it also lowercase letters. So what is this bell hooks thing that you're talking about? Like that was kind of the confusion. So the demand for these things is often creating, it's like entering into rules of language that are objective and demanding that you make exceptions for certain people, and then getting angry at you when you use the standard form because they're demanding a specific exemption from it. So that's kind of part of the problem as well, is that
Yes,
what and I think Jordan Peterson well, other people have identified this, but he was the first one to kind of frame it, the first time I'd heard it framed in this: we should be free to use language in the way that we objectively think is the best way to use language. And if we have people that are demanding these things, and even worse, everyone's just kind of going along with it because they're afraid of whatever the consequences, then that seems to me to be possibly a problem.
yeah, I think we forget what matters the most: respect. Like, call me Rima, call me Dr. Azar, call me Bambi, call me whatever you want to call me. Say hey, without a name, but show me respect. I'm fine. I respect you, you respect me. It goes both ways, right? So the common sense, we seem to have lost that common sense, it seems to me.
Well, I think it's this totalitarianism in my own, is like forcing people to do things. That's we should be first of all discussing it, and if someone is being rude, we shouldn't throw them in jail for being rude. We should not talk to them or tell them to piss off or whatever, right? We shouldn't be trying to shape people into what we think they should be in perfectly social circumstances. It's another thing if people are running red lights and stuff like that, because if we had everyone just doing whatever they wanted with respect to red lights, then there'd be all sorts of carnage. But whether someone says they or he or she, this is, unless they're doing it, I get, well, then we're getting into difficulties. If people are doing it aggressively in a way to insult someone,
yeah, that's a different story, or abuse.
but then that's difficult to tell. Even that is like, well, this kind of a little bit in that kind of gray area. So just tell the person to piss off and don't, whatever.
It seems to me that we are losing our energy on I know it's important for some people or many people, but
Yeah.
superficial things and missing what are we doing truly for the rights of transgender people or rights of women or rights of gay people, or it seems to me, and we're forgetting that we're all humans. We're all like, why are we subdividing us into subcategories? And it's too much.
Yeah. So why do you think that that's happened? Like someone who's experienced Lebanon and Quebec and English Canada, why do you think this is happening?
For me, it seems, I call it sometimes on Bambi, collectively insane times. Our collectively insane times, not individually, collectively. There's something, loss of common sense. I call it insanity with all due respect to not insanity using in that term, but collectively there's, are we bored? We don't know what to do. We're like, or we don't believe in our civilization anymore, in ourselves. What is happening? Like, is this a form of modern sectarianism? Is it being used to let us be divided? I don't know by whom, they, I say this, or is it us, our own, we're like, we're so much into, do we say in English, Puritanism? Pure, like we want things to be so pure, like we can't talk anymore. Like now it's so refreshing. We're talking, we're exchanging, we're agreeing, we're disagreeing. You're asking me tough questions. I'm trying to answer from the best of my capacity. I may ask, I don't know if my questions are tough or, but I mean, we're talking. People don't talk openly like that anymore.
No.
They say the opposite of what they think. It's scary.
So this is the final topic because we've got about 5 minutes left, I guess.
Oh, okay.
That's why it needs to be 2 hours. People think that's too long, but you have to, to get into things, it takes a while. So I'm curious about your case. And I know that you got all these considerations about what you can say or not say, but I just because of my own interest and probably the interest of viewers is I just saw in your Bambi blog that you're going to arbitration in April, I believe, March and April, right? Or
April and May.
April and May, and it's going to be about 9 days. It seemed like they booked 9 days for it.
Yes, I don't know if the whole 9 days will be used, but not over 9 days.
Yes. And so, do you have a sense of what is going to happen in that arbitration?
No, I know it's coming soon. I know everyone is busy working on this. I know I have my term to finish on teaching.
You're teaching right now as well.
Yes, after December. So my suspension was from May to end of November, so 7 months without pay and not allowed on campus. But then I came back and I'm teaching my 2 winter courses.
And why were you not allowed on campus?
Probably toxicity.
Like, did they tell you that you can't be on campus?
Yeah, that was part of the discipline. Yes, not allowed on campus and suspended without pay, both.
And I guess that's because they were implying that you pose some kind of threat with your, what was it? Speaking to BIPOC, the allegations that you're speaking to BIPOC students in unkind ways on your blog.
I'm not going to talk about my case. Let me say in general, maybe your case, maybe my case, other cases. It happens a lot. And Dr. Mathieu Bocoté from Quebec explains it very well. He's a great sociologist. He explains how things happen. We demonize, like we make the person infréquentable in French. So don't talk to the person. So it's and what happens is that's part of it, like, right, there's something toxic. You're allowed to attack because and what happens while doing that, the discourse is being limited. We cannot say, let's say, systemic racism, does it exist, yes or no, or was it, we cannot question it anymore.
No.
I'm giving an example, or whatever concept or whatever the topic, it doesn't matter. So we're limiting. So some people are allowed to talk, not others. Or what is in the gray area or dissent. He explains it really well.
Who is that person that you're talking about?
I'm not a sociologist. His name is Dr. Mathieu Bocoté. Mathieu Bocoté. He is excellent. He writes sometimes in the Journal de Montréal. He's now in France, and he wrote books. He has books in French. But the Montreal Gazette interviewed him once. He is an interesting phenomenon. You may, of course, not agree with many of his ideas, most probably, maybe, but I think you will see his talent. He explains these things very well.
Yes. And do you have one arbiter? Is that what the format's going to be?
One main and two others.
Oh, you have a panel.
It's
going to be a panel.
Yes.
Okay, because I'm -1.
That's my understanding. But
main and then you have the lawyers, the union lawyer.
Yes,
and
representing
the university lawyer.
Yes.
Yes. And so how is that? How is the interaction with the union working out for you?
I am grateful to everyone who has been supportive, and my union rep, the first and foremost, and the union and everyone, CAUT, everyone. There has been also a very refreshing movement at my university of people talking about freedom of expression, of academic freedom. I see sometimes some emails going back and forth. So that's a good thing that has happened, because everyone was traumatized. And you know how it is, especially in a small town, like, you know, you walk outside, some people are not the same with you, or don't want to be associated with you. Some people talk, some people don't talk. It's fear. Fear is a powerful emotion.
Yes. So in your case, I assume before this all blew up, you had there was no history that you had of being, you know, disliked and
none whatsoever. I love my university. I love my town, my province.
That must have been a bit of a shock for you to have that happen.
It is still shocking, I would say. But when I think of what's happening, the bigger picture, I understand how it happens. Our stories are known, many others are not known. Many suffer silently. So that's why it's important to talk and say no to these things, whichever, like whatever the reason, the political opinion side, whatever the story, scientific opinion, whatever, these like censorship, or some say it cancellation, censorship, whatever it is called, is abusive, is excessive. Why do we do that in our universities and in our societies, democratic societies? Why are we allowing it to happen? And why are we, like, how can I say it? It's if you take the word cancel culture, we contribute to it without wanting to, sometimes even maybe us by self-censoring ourselves. So that's the culture part. Maybe others by being afraid, and I understand the fear. And I understand how people need to protect their interests, family, business, income, earning a living. I have respect for that. Some people have the courage to publicly support, like what you did with me. You wrote comments on my blog. I'll always be grateful, especially coming from you. You know, I know what you have been through, and we all know. So thank you.
Yeah, no, I think it's really, you know, sort of the idea, and you talked about this with Jordan Peterson about, you know, why, or people within your department, people that were your colleagues, were not making public statements supporting you, right? And I think it's a little bit, and you mentioned that because things are all confidential, there's a lot of confidential things. People are thinking, you know, well, we don't really know what's happened. Like, so if we don't know, like, if we then end up supporting Rima, and it turns out you were, you know, worst case scenario, I guess, that you were, you know, berating a student and, you know, making insulting comments about pronouns to people, or like what these kinds of things, then now you're kind of supporting a person who's been engaged in, like, that's a difficulty to know when things are kept confidential and they're not known what's happened.
True. I totally agree. It's part of the problem.
Then people, and so this is why I think one of the biggest problems we're facing, and I'm facing it seriously, is the lack of transparency about everything and the lack of openness by our institutions to, release things that have happened. And like, I can understand if you didn't want things to be released because it was whatever, maybe you made a mistake or something like that, and you don't want that to be broadcast. But in my case, it's like, I have 300 documents. I want every single one of those documents to be public. And I'm being told, well, this could harm your case if you do this, and you've got to be careful and this and that. And that kind of prevents the mobilization of people who, if they knew the story, would say, oh, this is crazy. I think yours is enough known that it's like, if people don't, understand that this is kind of a hysteria, it almost seems to me to be hysteria that's happening.
If I may say two things quickly about my case, is the blog is there. Everyone can go search, see what is written, etc. And students and people and everyone have the right not to agree, not to read it, write comments, negative, positive. That's one thing. But of course, other stories or false allegations are at a different level. And I would say, usually, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So people who have known me for years know who I am, my values, or how I usually act and react when with people, know that some things it's out of character. So that's one thing. So I've spent years in New Brunswick building relationships and mentoring my students to build respectful relationships with our partners, research, hospitals, community members, and it takes just one round of that thing, the censorship thing to destroy everything. How fair is that?
Yeah, no, it's outrageous. Like I can't say strongly enough, shame on Mount Allison University, because they're the ones who've allowed it to happen. They are the institution in charge. Everyone who's had any part of that should be held to account for the terrible things that they've done.
And to go beyond Mount Allison University is having the courage to stand up. As our institutions, mainly employers, but standing up against these things and saying no when that happened. Again, bringing it back to Dr. Mathieu Bocoté, who said, it's the only thing we have to do is to have the courage to stand up and say, no, we're not gonna let one of our employees go. One of one of the most productive scholars of Canada in your area. What a shame also, right?
Well, anyway, Rima, we've reached the hour point here. So it's time to turn the screens, and you can take the helm and ask me anything. Ask me anything that you want to know, or about my work or my situation or these kinds of things. Of course, as similar to you, there might be some things that I'll have to be a bit cautious about, just because, I could supposedly taint the arbitration proceedings, and I don't want to do that. I want to be reinstated at Mount Royal, and I don't want to do anything that is going to compromise that. But at the same time, I want people to understand what's at stake and what's been going on in a general way.
Well, it works really well, because my question, I'm really interested in you and not the story or you. So my question is, how are you doing today, Francis?
I'm doing very well. I'm talking with Rima Azar, one of my heroes. So I things can't be very much better than that. So I'm doing very, it's kind of as you probably know, an up and down process. I had some difficulties. Well, first of all, I'm slightly different than you in that I was ready. I've been battling it out I guess I've been doing it for about 25 years. So
Wow.
I've been involved in battling it out for 25 years. First with the government of the Northwest Territories, then as a graduate student, and then as a professor at Mount Royal University, because of my controversial area of research and my, to some extent, dissenting position. And I should mention my co-author, Albert Howard, who I, for many things I've co-authored with him. Our perspective is a dissident perspective, is a critical perspective on Indigenous policy in Canada. And for that, we have been attacked constantly for 25 years. So when that happens, you know that things could unfold in a way that could result in terrible consequences. And you try to manage things as best you can. But, unfortunately, in my case, that actually happened in December 2021 at Mount Royal. And I wasn't sure whether it would or not, but I thought it was definitely one of the possibilities that was going to happen, and had been preparing for it at Mount Royal since 2016.
Oh, wow.
And had recorded everything since 2016 when things started to go sideways. Anyway, so right now, things are going very well. I'm sure there's been blips with, things, not good things happening, and dealing with those things. And that's why I thought your work on stress was very interesting, because, you need to manage stress. When you're in my situation, like you and I are, you have to develop a way of thinking about it that doesn't defeat you. Like you can't be, you cannot be defeated. You have
Absolutely.
to do, and as well, you have to be careful not to make a mistake that is going to be catastrophic.
It's
Which
true.
is,
So make a choice. Sorry, I hope I did not interrupt
no,
you. You're done. Okay. First, you look great. So I hope it's it's a reflection of what you said. You're doing well, and also chronic stress is the problem, not acute stress. So that your stress, my stress, people going through that like us, it's chronic, right? So it's over months, years in your case.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you need to preserve your energy and find ways. And what you're doing is working for you. And you said, taking the right decision is tough. I learned that from Dr. Mirella De Civita from Quebec, that when we have the choice between two good options, it's the most difficult one, not the wrong and the right, it's the good and the good. So which decision to take or not to take during the process. So I admire your coping. Thank you for sharing.
I think part of it with stress is being in control as well. I think people need to understand that. And it's when you feel that you're not in control that you feel the most stress. So that, I think, is very important to think about, how can I assert control? And the biggest problem for me, which I did allude to earlier, has been, how much do I want to release publicly about my case? And it's uncertain. It's one of those uncertain areas. And I'm trying to release as much as I possibly can without, entering into some kind of, problematic situation where now I'm going to have been seen to have violated something that the employer has declared. And the problem is that and I'm not sure about your case, but in my case, the employer makes all sorts of declarations that are highly dubious. So it's like, well, okay, just because the employer says something, does that mean that I should abide by it? Like I have to critically analyze what their directive, what's driving their directive, and whether their directive is based in some kind of principle of justice, or whether it's just their attempt to control things to, to be frank, oppress me further. Like, I find the institution is very oppressive and autocratic and has done terrible, terrible things. And, their directives, is this just more of the same, or is there some actual, legitimate rationale for what it is that they're talking about?
So you're trying to be as strategic as possible.
Yes, yes. And I think I've, so far so good, I guess.
Yes.
It's difficult because and I have a lot of advisors. So I'm not sure if you had that problem, but I have a big network of people.
Bravo, yes, yes.
But they all have different views.
Yeah, and in the end, you will
in the end,
decide.
You have to just weigh all the different, kinds of arguments, and then make a decision as to what you think that you should do. And that's kind of stressful, because it's like if I do the wrong thing here, then I could go down a road that it's going to be hard for me to get back on track. So
and yeah, if I may say, when things move forward, we look back, we usually say, oh, maybe, sometimes we say, had I done this or that, but let's remember that the decision you took at that moment is with the input you had, the data you had. So it was the best one under the circumstances. And if you're careful at every step of the way, that's a great thing.
Yeah. So I'm trying to think things through, a number of steps ahead. If this happens, what, and that's like, and I think, Jordan Peterson as well has mentioned this, that, there's consequences to doing things, but there's also consequences to not doing things.
Absolutely.
And so, and this is what people have to keep in mind, is that if I don't do something, then what is going to happen? And a lot of it's people trying to push you around. So someone tries to push you around, and you have I guess, two choices. Am I just going to ignore it, or am I going to do something about it? Sometimes it's best to ignore it, because it's just too, you got too many things going on. However, if you choose to not ignore it, what's the best way to not ignore it? And do you CC everyone on the email that this email was sent to you, or do you just send a private email to someone? Like all these kinds of judgments. And the best thing generally is to try to, in my view, is to try to be as public as possible about it. But of course that depends on the context, but still, I think as a general rule, the more public, the better, because then you need to shine the light on it, as opposed for it to be, it's when it gets into these secretive, what I call star chamber types of processes, that you can really suffer terrible consequences. Whereas, I think that generally when I have discussions with the public about everyone is kind of, they're astounded that this is that this kind of thing is happening. They don't understand how that can be happening. And it's like, well, it's because you get people in authority who threaten your job, and get you into a secretive process, and you're reliant on other things which are not exactly reliable. And so you're and you have to keep your cool, because if you start losing it, then now you're going to be seen as a crazy person. So like, this is all kind of these things that have to go on in your head when you're thinking about it.
Thank you. My second question is that I know at least a couple of university graduates in New Brunswick who have shared the most recent and shocking media articles about your story, the last episode, the firing. And like me, they are speechless. So it's hard, really hard still to digest such level of censorship at our universities. So my question for you is, what can you tell them about your story to either reassure them or warn them about any danger, or maybe both, reassure and warn?
Yeah. Yeah, it depends. Well, for people who are unaware of this, on a website that has been developed with respect to my case, wokeacademy.info, there have been 6 episodes released to the public, which are not the entire story, but give people enough of a glimpse of what's going on, so that they can look at it. In this, in terms of what's been released, it's just trying to walk the fine line between, telling enough so that people don't think you're just making stuff up, and not releasing the documents that could be. So I think almost everything there is publicly obtained information. And the article which is best so far on my case is an article by Peter Sean Taylor in C2C Journal that was done in February 2022. And Taylor kind of, I think, basically has a good sense of what's happening. Reassurance and warning. I guess I can't be very reassuring about things, because what's happened, for people who don't have a good sense of what's going on here, there is developments in the university that have been happening since the 1960s, where identity politics has begun to assert itself, and it was not immediately, it was tolerated. I guess it was sort of tolerated, and it was sort of seen as a particular segment of the academy. But starting in around 2010, it began to assert itself much more aggressively, and now has pretty much taken over the machinery of the university in what is known as diversity, inclusion, and equity types of policies. And that is, it's destroying the universities. It's going to destroy them. It's possible that they can be beaten back. Like, that's the question, is it too late to beat them back? And there's movement against it, like there's organization against it. The danger is that, I guess, the identity politics has become so deeply ingrained that people can't think outside of identity politics. So what you're going to see happen is white identity politics. That's going to be, because everyone has given up on the universe. Like, as you were saying, you were talking about earlier, the common humanity, people, individuals, sort of these, and of course, because I'm a historical materialist, which comes out of the Marxist tradition. That's what's so interesting about my case. Class politics. So class politics has been completely pushed to the side, and we have these identities that are perceived to be oppressed. And class politics, individualistic types of politics, humanistic politics, like those are all, there's universal categories that can be recognized and worked towards in all of those kinds of politics. In identity politics, there's no universals. It's all these specific identities that are all warring against one another for control over the universities, and they're completely intolerant to any oppositional positions. And so that's kind of where we're at now at the university level. And with your case, with my case, I don't know of any other high-profile public cases at this time that are happening in Canada.
At one point, there was Lieutenant Duval in the university.
Oh, yes. Yes, Lieutenant Duval.
Yes, Lieutenant Duval.
There's another issue and that's part of my case too. And it was part of Mark Mercer's case. So Mark Mercer, Lieutenant Duval, myself, Wendy Mesley, the journalist.
Oh, yes. Also.
Well, I was defending Wendy Mes. So that's how I got it with that. That's kind of actually what started the mob against me, to some extent, was defending Wendy Mesley. And Lieutenant Duval got ensnared in it. And there's a woman from Concordia whose name I believe is McKinnon, who got, because she was trying to teach Pierre Valiere's book, White Niggers of America.
Yes. And there are stories also that we don't know about because it's confidential. So,
Yes.
So most probably for every known case that we are maybe the tip of the iceberg, there are other stories happening most probably, or about to happen if we keep going in that direction.
Yeah, so on the wokeacademy.info episode, I believe it's 5, kind of provides the sequence of what happened with respect to my defense of Wendy Mesley. But that's a specific issue, but it's connected to the whole wokeism, reified identity politics, which is what James Lindsay and Helen Pluckrose refer to. That's what people call wokeism, which is identity politics that has become a totalitarian in the university. And the thing about the book White Niggers of America and referring to it, not, like, I don't even know what people expect people to do about this. This is the title of a book.
Yeah.
And everyone knows that saying a title of a book is totally different than hurling a racial slur at somebody. Anyway, that's part of this wokeism's obsession with language and words and the right use of words. And if you don't use the words in the right way, you're an oppressor. And if you're Black, you can use words differently than if you're white, because Black people are the most oppressed and white people are the most oppressive. And so therefore it should be Black people who are determining how words should be used. This is all part of this reified postmodernist kind of thing that's happening. And that is toxic. That's completely toxic. Mm-hmm. And in the university, it's very toxic, because that's what part of our thought process is dealing in concepts and words. And if we don't feel free to be able to use things in like justifiable ways, then we're going to be very limited in terms of the thoughts that we can have and the conversations that we can have and the ideas that we can exchange and so on. So there's this huge clamp, like a vice that is tightening. And for many years, I was very free. I felt very free. I didn't, I really didn't think, referring to the book White Niggers of America, I thought everyone would understand that I'm referring to a book title, and that's not going to be a big issue. Like that, I can explain it to people and they will understand. Well, in 2020, no matter how hard I tried to explain it, people didn't understand. Like they refused to understand, and they just kept on calling me a racist.
And it doesn't serve the cause, the story of the book, the Quebec situation.
And I said, there's no way I'm going to give in on this. Pierre Valliere used the title of that book for a reason.
Exactly.
He had a political reason to use that title, and I am not going to censor Pierre Valliere. So you're going to have to put a gun to my head, and then we'll talk. And then maybe, if you put a gun to my head, I will, but I'm not going to give in on this one. And that's kind of what, that stance was what, kind of enraged the mob. And they just were totally irrational. They could not accept that I would have a legitimate reason for referring to Pierre Valliere's book title. It's like,
yes, and thank you for your courage. Wow. Okay.
And Wendy Mesley, like, there was an example of a horrible situation, is instead of her standing up, and I know why she did it, because she thought she could, by apologizing and submitting, then she would be then people would take pity on her and not turf her out of the CDC. But it just made it worse, because well, she probably would have been turfed out anyway, but at least she would have made the principled case, and we would have moved forward. Like she would have been taken down probably anyway, but at least it would have been from a public interest standpoint, would have moved things forward and would have allowed people to kind of show solidarity with her and move with her. But instead, CBC managed to get her to give this absolutely horrible, groveling apology. And so that was just stomach churning, having to watch that. But I will, Wendy Mesley did nothing wrong. Everyone who went after her should just be completely ashamed. And the CBC, that's just disgusting.
How sad, very sad.
And the fact that she could do that to her, she's a very distinguished, accomplished journalist, celebrity, in fact, and that she could have been taken down by that was, you know, and again, and this is a word I use for people who do this, race hustling. I've used that term a number of times. There's a it's a phenomenon called race hustling, which Thomas Sowell, who's a Black academic in the United States,
yes,
coined this term, so it's not my term.
Yes.
But there's people who, if there's a moment of perceived racial tension, there'll be people who jump in and use that for their own self-interested benefit. And they'll use that situation. And that's what people did with Wendy Mesley. Is there was a bunch of Black journalists who are trying to, you know, elbow their way to the top of the CBC. And then they used that case against Mesley for their own opportunistic purposes. And I thought that was absolutely outrageous as well. And it should have been, you know, people should have been held accountable for that. But instead, there was more, there was more submission and groveling, and, you know, it's like that you're not going to defeat this by giving into it. It has to be faced head on in these situations, which of course people are obviously reluctant to do, but that's the only way that it's going to be dealt with.
Wow. So given all what you said thus far, where do you see Canada and the world in 2, 5, and 10 years from now?
Yeah, well, there's two possibilities. One is that we are able to, well, there's a few possibilities. One is the best case scenario is, you know, people battle back against identity politics, not with other forms of identity politics.
Exactly, that's the danger.
That's the danger. But with some kind of politics which has the possibility to bring about commonality amongst people and build a better future. Now, of course, there's a big dispute as to how that, but amongst so there's people I interact with who have a wide range of political views, and we're all united in our opposition to identity politics. But then the real kind of debates begin about whether it's a sort of a liberal capitalist vision or a socialist, you know, materialist vision. That hasn't yet happened yet because we've gotten distracted completely by all this identity politics. So that's the first thing, is that if can we defeat identity politics? If we can, then we can get into the other arguments. If we can't, then we're going to have some kind of fascist system of very, very totalitarian force, coercive, some kind of coercive system, whether it be like a Nazi Germany kind of scenario with, of course, white identity politics, that's where that's going to go, or some kind of horrible wokeism kind of aspect, which I don't know. We don't know what that would look like, that kind of thing. But that's the other, and you know, anyone who wants to build a more cooperative future for humanity, you know, should realize the danger of identity politics. Like that is a real, so I guess that's kind of the future, and that's why I think your case, my case, probably especially my case, like I don't want to downgrade your situation because I think it's very important, but I think your case is so ridiculous. like that it just shows the extremes of how, but with my case it's much more complicated, and because it has a lot of moving parts, and because I've been battling it for so long, it's all going to come out, the kind of dynamics that have been going on. So that's kind of ground zero. I see my case as ground zero in the battle against identity politics. Although yours is definitely one of the major battles that's got to be fought. I think your case will be successful. I think there's no question that your case will be successful. Because I don't really think you have any opponents. Like there's no one who's actively opposing you, is there?
Well, there are always things more to any story, and some things are public or have been public, but we will see how things will go.
But I don't see very much public opposition to your case. And I also see CAUT has come out in support, saying like that you were wrongly treated.
Thanks to them for their statement. Thanks to them.
So CAUT has not come out the same way behind me.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
You know, they might. So maybe they're like,
I hope, yes.
Documents. But as I
Yes.
said, my case, because it's more aggressively opposed to wokeism.
Yes.
It's an in-your-face opposition to wokeism. Those who have woke, and CAUT has woke elements in it, which you're probably aware of.
I think every family, every union, every administration, it's everywhere, right? So
Yeah,
people
so
are divided on it.
CAUT, and I'm not sure when it was in 2021, I think. It started taking these political stances on things like the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs and the indigenous ways of knowing stuff, and that was all areas where I was very critical of. Like I'm a critic of those positions, and so there's a strong element in CAUT which would see, you know, that's the problem with taking these political stances, is that you then make it difficult for people to dissent.
Yeah. But my question is, why are unions into politics like that and not about the employees? What the best interest of the employees? Why are we? Don't get me wrong, causes are important, but I mean, why unions are doing that, going beyond the mission of the rights of the employees and protecting the rights? Why are we going into that direction? Why?
It's wokeism. Well, there's two things. Wokeism. So wokeism has captured the unions. And then there's the cozy relationship between unions and administration.
Yes.
And they're slightly related, but they're also somewhat different. So in terms of wokeism, and this is something we're battling with in many unions, it's kind of asserted that in identity politics, as we said, there's this intersectional scale, and those members who are the most oppressed should be paid more attention to than those members who are seen as belonging to this oppressive category. So in my case, where I have disputes with, and this is public, an indigenous scholar who's no longer at Mount Royal, whose name is Renee Watchman. So Renee Watchman, we were having conflicts because Renee Watchman thought that my criticism of indigenization constituted racism and harassment and discrimination and so on. There was more of the union, well, they didn't do it this overtly, but there's this kind of sense that Renee Watchman should be listened to more than me. Like that's kind of the bias that's in place, rather than there's a member, Renee Watchman's a member, it's no longer, that's why I'm talking about her, is because she's no longer at Mount Royal. So it's not like I'm talking about a member of Mount Royal in any kind of way and so on. So this is all kind of open season as far as I'm concerned. but people would, in the union, would support Renee Watchman just because she's indigenous. And
But
would,
what, oh,
that's
sorry,
kind of like that, that's kind of how it colors things. So
yes, what
instead of
about,
and it would be Renee Watchman is entitled to her views on everything. I'm entitled to my views. We both should be able to express them openly.
yes.
That view is not accepted anymore. It's like, no, you're not indigenous, so you can't comment on this.
But see, what about people from indigenous communities who share your opinion or who share other opinions? We don't hear their voices.
Yeah, but that's like, they're kind of what's called Uncle Tomahawks. They're people who have, you know, breathed in the white supremacy culture and have become quislings in the whole kind of political dynamics, which of course raises the question, why is it that you see Renee Watchman's view as the indigenous view when there are indigenous people who disagree with Renee Watchman?
Yes, it's the elite view rather. It's the
so it's like a predetermined kind of correct position. That's why
yes.
I referred to this in other areas as politically correct totalitarianism. So the idea is that you've got the right view, and actually I believe it was the Catholic Church that started. It was a phrase called "error has no rights." So if you're in error, you don't have the right to speak because the truth is known. So religions often take on this position, and what we have now is kind of another dogmatic form, asserting what it perceives to be the true position.
Yeah.
And that
it's a cult, like
everyone who's quote unquote incorrect or wrong doesn't have any right to speak because they're, contaminating the discourse, which is the truthful discourse and so on. But that's not how scholarly, academic, scientific processes work, because we're constantly, as you've said, in things like systemic racism, like no one even really knows what it is that we're talking about here. So we have to get that all figured out, and in trying to figure it out, we might say some things which turn out to be incorrect or whatever, but we shouldn't be shut down during that process, because it's the process that will allow us to have a better understanding of what the things to do are, this sort of thing. So with respect to the unions, so wokeism has had a major impact in capturing unions across the country. And then you have the administration, which is not quite the same, and this is still trying to be understood. And I wrote a piece on this called I think it's called when wokeism and the corporate university intersect. So universities have become corporations that are and Mount Allison, this is good in your case. So Mount Allison has a brand, so it's a corporation. It's no longer an academic institution. when it's doing the things that it's doing, it's no longer an academic institution. It's a corporation, and they want to get across a certain perception of themselves. And often what the perception is they want to give out is they're a university that really is interested in making sure that BIPOC students feel welcome and comfortable and so on in the university. And that then puts them in conflict with professors like you, because even when you write on your private blog, which has got nothing to do with you in the classroom or anything, it feels that Mount Royal's reputation is being tarnished by having a professor say things which are going against what they want their brand to be. And they will try and get you to submit and stop saying the things that you're saying. And most people will do it. And they'll just say, okay, well, I'm just going to want to keep my job, so I'm not going to say anything anymore on my blog. I'm going to stop talking on my blog, that sort of thing. Whereas, you continue with your blog, hopefully not changing anything that changing anything that you say, although, you know, it's hard. And, you know, you have to certainly probably think more carefully about what you post now than what you used to post, unfortunately. You know, and I noticed it myself too. Like for many years until I guess 2020, I didn't self-censor. I said what I thought was true. And I thought that academic freedom and tenure and everything would protect me. I thought it would. And then, you know, towards the end, it was, you know, this has got to be, I've got to fight this out. I gotta fight it out in a principled way and see where the chips fall. But I'm not gonna submit. I'm gonna argue it out. And that's not, I don't, and who knows where it all goes.
Yeah. So far, I'm not self-censoring, and I will not self-censor, because the day I self-censor, I become part of what we are denouncing. So I'm denouncing that extremism, radicalism. Yeah. Anyways, now I have questions for you that are really in a different place,
Okay.
more like related to some fun things. So what is a hobby you enjoy practicing or maybe consider doing in the future?
Well, a hobby that I have now, or a hobby that
Yes, that you have, or something you want to do in the future.
Well, my passion is skiing, downhill skiing.
Yay! Wow.
So, and actually, I joke because I'm an atheist that skiing for me is spiritual.
Wow. Good for you.
I actually have a book that I'm writing. Well, not like it's one of the projects that I have. It's a joke book called The Spirituality of Skiing.
I like that.
To sort of make fun of, you know, kind of the new age spiritualism stuff and referring to skiing. So that's what is for me is a great you know, hobby that I engage in. So I think that's enough. Like I have a very intellectual life, and my husband Albert Howard, who I write things with, we have very philosophical interactive.
Thank you to both of you.
Yeah, so that helps a lot too, like that. So I'd like to, you know, collaborate with him more in the future. He's currently writing a book on religion, which I've been slightly involved in historically, but I've just been preoccupied with all my various kind of things. So I'm hoping that we can write some things together once I get myself, you know, that's the problem, is that you dig yourself deeper and deeper and deeper into these, you know, these controversies, and it's going to take a couple of years to, you know, write everything about it and get it out of my system as to what's happening. But yeah, so that's one of my major. So in terms of my own situation, I'm writing a book about this current controversy, and of course we don't know what the ending.
Yes.
We don't know what the ending is going to be, but still, it's not. That's one of the good things, is that you probably found it to be slightly oppressive, in that you just kind of want to get it over with so that you can get back to your actual research that has nothing to do with all this craziness. Whereas that's part of my academic work now, is to kind of explain academically how Mount Royal went from being a great institution with tremendous promise, because it was a college that was trying to become a university, so it had to think things out quite clearly as to what its you know, how it was going to conduct itself, in 2008 to being a complete shambles in 2022. Like, how did an institution get destroyed? Which I think I have some insights into from my wider kind of Canadian perspective, but also kind of looking at things in depth in sort of almost a participant observation kind of methodology, because I had many interactions where I was able to, kind of try and do things, and then there would be this reaction, and then kind of looking at why that all occurred. So it's quite interesting.
Great hobbies, so skiing and writing.
Yeah.
Now I'm gonna ask you, who is your hero, or who are your heroes in life? Characters from childhood, current heroes.
Well, Albert Howard is one of my
Oh.
heroes. I know that sounds a bit trite, but if I hadn't met Albert, because I was in this program at University of Victoria, which had a lot of postmodernist kinds of elements in it, relativistic stuff, and I kind of was attracted to that in the 90s. And when I met Albert had a very rational kind of perspective, which I was resistant to initially, but I became convinced. So I think my whole thought process would be very, very different if I hadn't met Albert. So that was very fortunate that happened. And in terms of, I guess, the figure, the philosophical figure who I admire most was George Orwell. George Orwell, and I read quite a bit on his life and his work. I've read every single thing he's written. I've tried to read. I probably have missed some things, but everything I see of his, I read, because he was one of those unusual figures that, really is truthful, like completely truthful. Like it's easy in being a human being that, you meet people and you want people to like you, and you want to have, you sort of surround yourself with like-minded, like thinking
Friends.
people. Yeah, but like we should be able to have friends with whom we disagree, right? Like that.
And
That's
relatives too.
Yeah,
Relatives.
relatives is a bit more difficult. Well, you have to tolerate some people, but I'm not talking about. I'm talking about people with whom you disagree, yet you have respect for that person, and you'll listen to what they have to say and trying to figure. And you still might disagree with them, continue to disagree with them, but you don't dismiss them. And Orwell was very conscious of this, and he was an editor for a publication. I can't remember the name of it. I think it was the Tribune. It was called the Tribune, I think. Anyway, he was the editor, and he tried very, very hard to bring, in terms of left-wing politics. So this was a very vibrant time in the 30s and 40s and 50s in left-wing politics, because you had, the Russian Revolution that had happened, you had the Soviet Union, you had fascism, and you had a bunch of different perspectives on things. And he was very careful when he was getting people to contribute to his publication to have these different perspectives aired so that people could read them and engage with them, and not, just shut people down and censor people and so on. So I think that kind of mentality is really lacking today. And I think, people should really, read more about Orwell, and so that's another person I really, another is Bertrand Russell is another major figure that I really respect, more to do with writing, one of the most clear writers that I've ever read. And so as a philosopher, he has one of the best books I've ever read. I think it's called The History of Western Philosophy, or and it has the way he writes about it is he brings in the historical context and so on. So I think, that is another person that I'm very interested, and that's sort of more of intellectual, sort of respect, and attempts to kind of figure out that art of being able to write in such a clear way, bringing in historical depth to discussions.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing. So we know you love to write, you love to read. What about music? What is your favorite type of music, if any, favorite?
Yeah, so this is kind of funny because I was my mother forced me to play the piano
Wow.
when I was a child, and I detested, because of this, I detested classical music. I found it actually quite painful to deal with it. So as a kind of a rebel, my favorite music is like Led Zeppelin types of music. So Cream, the band Cream is one of my favorites. Led Zeppelin, of course, I just mentioned. The Doors, Pink Floyd,
Pink Floyd.
Jimi Hendrix, that kind of clustering of artists, and I guess in the 60s, in the late 60s and early 70s, that were, I don't quite know what the genre, certainly rock and roll, but it would be considered more on the harder side of rock and roll as opposed to the sort of soft rock side. So but that's sort of, I guess, a slight rebelliousness kind of aspect in my personality.
Interesting. And what makes you smile in life?
I don't know. I think I have a pretty good sense of humor. I know it's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, I like your sense of sarcastic.
I have a sarcastic. It can be quite abrasive, my sense of humor. I'm just thinking of like comedians. Ricky Gervais is one of my favorite comedians. Well, of course, Titania McGrath. So Titania McGrath is a satirical Twitter account by the comedian Andrew Doyle in the UK. And my satirical character, Frances McGrath, with an X, is like a much more aggressive, nasty Titania McGrath. But that's what Frances McGrath was modeled on. So I find that right now, I find wokeism. I'm always trying to figure out how to satirize wokeism. And I've done some really, really edgy things, which I thought were hilarious. But my adversaries didn't think they were funny. And I got nailed. I got seriously nailed. That's one of the parts against me, is my Frances McGrath kinds of antics. And because I look at Andrew Doyle's, he's much better at it than me. So I'm kind of studying him. And I don't, because my style's not really like, it's more extreme. So like you mentioned, like sort of these kind of BIPOCs and the LGBTQ. So I called the LGBTQ initialism TGBQ2S LMNOP. So that was kind of my funny, like, because no one can keep track of the letters, and you put the LMNOP at the end of it. I thought that was hilarious.
Yes, and you have what has been lost a lot nowadays, a sense of humor, like laughing at ourselves, our society, laughing at academia, where we're at right now. Like,
yeah. Anyway, so that was seen as being highly offensive, doing that to the LGBTQ initialism. But I think that's that sort of thing, the wokeism stuff. So, and there's these terms that are used, like feminist killjoy. So like, I know some people who call themselves that, and they actually take pride in killing joy. So I thought that was like, I would, refer to them as feminist killjoys and like that sort of thing. These kind of phrases now that you know, I just, the fact that people take them seriously, like the BIPOC, like calling people BIPOCs. It's just, I find that to be hilarious in some ways. So yeah, so these kinds of satirical, I find satire to be very amusing. And I think I'm too blunt. Like, I think the best satire is when you're more subtle. But because I'm impatient, I have sort of impatience. I tend to, you know, go for the jugular too in a too abrasive way in my satirical kind of shenanigans. But there's a funny one, and see, this is the kind of thing that people don't appreciate. So in one of my major areas of research is the unmarked graves of for residential schools. This is appears to be hysteria with no evidence whatsoever to support the existence of unmarked graves, and to some extent has been created through the whole Indigenous politics thing. Anyway, as part of this, which of course is wound up with the tragic nature of Indigenous policy. So there's been terrible injustices that have been done. And one of the worst problems is all these marginalized communities that have no hope for the future, high rates of fetal alcohol syndrome and all sorts of problems. But what's being done now in Indigenous policy does nothing to address
or clean water. It's not the clean water.
Yeah,
simply
terrible conditions. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, so there's these woke academic historians who I call brave white saviors. So that's another funny, the brave white saviors. They have taken upon themselves to castigate people for Canada Day, celebrating Canada Day, which, like, and I don't celebrate because I'm a historical materialist. I never really used to be very attached to Canada, but now that people are becoming tribal, you know, Canada seems like much better identity than, you know, all these identity politics kinds of things. Anyway, so there's these woke historians who are all like saying, how dare people celebrate Canada Day when, you know, all these unmarked graves, genocide, they're genocide deniers or genocide minimalizers. It's disgusting. They're flag waving and on and on and on, and just like being just terrible. And anytime you try to argue with them, they would just be impossible. So for Canada Day, I put a Canadian flag with a swastika on it, and said, you know, for all you disgusting people celebrating Canada Day, how dare you do this when we just heard about the, you know, 751 murdered children at the Cowessess killing fields, which of course Cowessess was not, it was just a cemetery that was associated with the community. It wasn't, there was nothing even, you know, particularly controversial about it. It wasn't even Indigenous or anything. And then I said, why don't you celebrate Hitler's birthday while you're at it? Anyway, I thought at the time, well, I still think that it was like pursuing the truth to kind of go after these people who were castigating people who celebrate Canada Day. And I know why most people celebrate Canada Day. They want to go see some fireworks, and they want to see a concert. And for, you know, someone who's, you know, working class Canadian who just wants to have a day off, to be comparing them to like a genocide celebrator. And like, anyway, so I got people, this got the mob completely enraged about this. And I was accused of, you know, mocking dead children and minimizing the Holocaust. That was a claim. But like, I was criticizing people for comparing Canada to Nazi Germany. Like, they're the ones, the people who compare Canada to Nazi Germany are the ones who are minimizing the Holocaust. Like that. So I was mocking them, their minimization of the Holocaust. Anyway, so that's the kind of danger of humor. But I find that, I still do find that because it had such a bad blowback, I kind of went, like that certainly hit a nerve there. But I thought it was very truthful because it was kind of very aggressively satirizing all this
But
nonsense.
one thing is sure, you're very creative, and creativity is a good thing in life usually.
Yes.
So now the question is, okay, you may go on and on about that, but what makes you angry in life?
I guess it's sort of unfairness. I guess it's unfairness that makes me angry. And then sort of anti-intellectualism, hypocrisy. I guess that's part of my thing, is that I get
agree with
I get really angry
three.
when people are hypocrites, and I want to expose their hypocrisy, which is what that's what essentially what the satirical warfare is doing, is it's trying to expose the hypocrisy of these woke people.
Interesting. So now, what do you fear the most in life?
I guess it's sort of being cast out of society. Like, fortunately, I have, that hasn't happened to me. So I've got a network, although I'm a pariah in many circles. I'm not cast out. But I think people who are cast out of society, that must just be absolutely horrendous.
Yes.
When you have no one to rely on, no one to support you, you're just alone. So I guess that's what drives most of the fear behind people, sort of speaking out, is that they think that they will be made an undesirable person who no one wants to associate with anymore.
Yes, thank you. Now the final question is, final one. What can we do individually and collectively to keep hope alive?
You have to organize. We need organization. That's the only thing that's going to do it. And I said I said before, totalitarianism is on the move. It's time to lean in. So, we can defeat this, but no one can do it alone. Like, you can't do it alone. And, that's kind of the frustrating thing about all of our kind of different cases is, we have individually, we have an impact that we've made, but there's nothing that's really lasting. It's all like, there'll be this blow up. Everyone will sort of gnash their teeth for, a month or so, and then it'll kind of go off the radar. So that's kind of the key thing that I'm working on right now, with the Society for Academic Freedom and Scholarship as the hub. So that's my main organization, but I'm trying to bring in to get kind of coalition building exercise going, which has to involve local university level activity. So getting people like yourself and other people at Mount Allison who probably agree with you, get them organized so they can support people locally in the university. Then you have a Canadian kind of organization which can kind of coordinate all that. And then you have the international organizations. Free Speech Union is one of them. FAIR, which I've had some involvement with, against intolerance and racism.
Yes.
Which is sort of fighting back against, all these kinds of wokeism kinds of initiatives. FIRE, which is a very good organization in about largely freedom of expression issues on university campuses. National Association of Scholars. These like we're all these kind of separate groups, but we need to kind of get more coordination so that we can fight things in a much more concerted way, which has not happened yet. So that's the hope, is for people to mobilize and to join these organizations, have some kind of connective kind of thing, so that it can just be a constant kind of pressure that's placed on the system. That's the only thing that's going to have any effect, I think.
Thank you. So hope in concrete action and in coming together and Thank you. Very
Yes.
important.
Anyway, Rima, I think we have come to the 2-hour point, or we're a little bit over 2 hours actually, but I thought we got into a whole bunch of very, very interesting ideas. So I wanted to thank you for appearing on the Rational Space Disputations, and I'm really anxious to find out how everything goes with your arbitration in April and May.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Take care, friends.